Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Welcome back to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. My name's Emily McDonald, and I am your host, and this episode is so near and dear to my heart. I'm very excited to talk about it today, because today we are going to be talking about New England. Now, New England is where I grew up. I've lived in 3 out of the 6 states in New England. My dad grew up in New England. I definitely am slightly biased towards this place, but I feel so strongly about it because I really have gotten the unique opportunity and chance to grow up traveling all around New England due to its very small size. And so, like I said, I am a little biased, but I'm going to try to the best of my ability to tell you where I think you should go in New England. And I want to talk to you about a lot of different things and kind of help you as a listener and as someone who maybe wants to travel here to sparse out exactly where to go. So I'm going to talk about why so many people love New England, what cities you should go to, the adventure that you're going to want to get, and of course, that culture that's happening here. But as always, like we always do, let's start with the basics. New England is combined up of the 6 most northeastern states, and those include Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. New England is famous for a lot of things. It's really famous for being quiet and a down-to-earth place, kind of tucked away from the rest of the U.S. in some ways very close to Canada, but it's very famous for its Ivy Leagues, its writers, its crazed sports fans, which I will certainly get to, the summer camps it has, the history, and of course, what I think a lot of people go to New England for is its 4 distinct season, and especially what I'm talking about is the fall time, which has that prime leaf peeping season. Now, New England, like I said, is generally really small. It's approximately 72,000 square miles. However, fun fact, Maine takes up more than half of the space than all of the other states in New England combined. And all of New England is generally really easily accessible because, like I said, there are so many small states. And so if you're planning on visiting, take my advice and rent a car while you're here. Public transport kind of exists, but it's extremely limited, and you really are going to want the freedom to be able to travel around. And I think one of the best parts of New England is if you are going to go for a week, you really can go to all 6 states if you want to. And so before we kind of start off the episode, before we start off with some of the nature that is in New England, I'm going to give you a fun fact about each state because all of New England is really unique, and there are definitely some weird facts that I did not know before starting this podcast. And just to give some of my sources, I got these facts literally straight from a website that's called 6 Amazing Facts You Didn't Already Know About New England. So here you go, one for each state. New Hampshire has the distinction of having the most pizzerias per capita of any state in the nation. Massachusetts has the biggest lottery payout. The state that has the largest collection of brain specimens on display is Connecticut. Vermont has the highest percentage of cat owners. The most elderly state in the country is Maine. And the very first ever circus performance was done in Rhode Island. So there you go. Those are some facts that you can think about. They're definitely facts that I'll be thinking about. There you go. Some food for thought for the rest of our episode. Right now, like I said, I want to get into a big attraction to New England, which is that nature piece that we're talking about. Like I said, you're going to want to bring a car. And I said that you're either going to want to bring a car or rent a car because I know that you are going to want the freedom to be able to travel around for that nature. There are so many parts of New England that, unlike I think a lot of other areas, are really untouched and untapped by a strong sense of that civilization. And I think that something in particular that does that is the mountains, which are so beautiful. And so after the break, I'm going to talk to you about exactly what mountains you should be going to. But I just wanted to bring up first kind of all of the different aspects of nature that New England does bring. And so obviously we have the mountains. There you can do skiing and hiking and tubing and so many of these things that are both, kid friendly and also fun as an adult. And I think New England, because it has so much outdoor recreation, is a great opportunity for adults if you want to get out and do something that maybe you haven't done in a long time. New England really gives you opportunities to tap into that childlike side of you by doing something like tubing down a mountain. But other than mountains, there are also some really beautiful oceans, and New England maybe gets pegged as less of a place for oceans because it does get cold for, 6, 7, 8 months out of the year, but there are some beautiful oceans that I'm certainly going to talk about. Something else I'd like to talk about is the wildlife that we have in New England. There are whales and moose and deer and so many things that are truly remarkable, and I think because of how much nature is around in New England, the forest is absolutely massive. You have opportunities to see animals that you really wouldn't see. In my backyard, I've seen, bears and coyotes and foxes and deer and, when I've been skiing, I've literally ran into a moose before. I mean, there are literally so many options, to see, this unique wildlife. And I think that's something that, should be seen when you're visiting New England. And something else is we have some amazing lakes. And I think that's a really popular, a very popular tourist destination is kind of those lakes in New Hampshire's, and Vermont and Maine and, more of those northern areas. There's a whole culture around that, and, vacationing on the lake is, I think, something that is kind of instilled in a lot of New Englander lifestyle, but it's definitely also a great tourist place to go to. And with that, obviously, comes swimming, but also, tubing and water skiing and a lot of different activities with that. And so we are going to take a quick break, but like I said, when we come back, I am going to tell you about which mountains in New England are very notable to go to and what you should be planning for your trip.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Back from our break, and this first segment, like I said, I want to start with the mountains of New England. The mountains are something that attract a lot of people to New England. In the warmer months, there are some incredible hikes that you can do. And then, of course, in the winter months, we have skiing. And something I want to say is that you're going to tend to find these things in the same places, meaning the places that you're going to want to hike are probably really close to the places that you're going to want to ski. And some states that I think that you should stay towards, if that's what you want to come to New England to do, is New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine. Those just have the most options for mountains. They have the most culture around hiking and skiing. And, later in the episode, I'm going to talk about activities in New England that have to do with skiing, and a lot more about skiing in general, because it is so important to New England. And so right now, I think I want to focus on if you're going to go to New England in the summer months and what hiking you should be doing. And something else I want to say is that you do not have to come to New England and expect to go on a ridiculous hike that is treacherous and difficult. If you have never hiked before in your life, New England is a great place to come to kind of get a very small exposure to that. And as we know, with the culture of hiking comes this very quiet, quaint, type of environment that, you can get even if you're not a hiker and you want to come and have a relaxing weekend or a relaxing week and be able to unplug and unwind. Consider, your options for activity around that, and then think about, is someone who hikes, is that going to be, a type of person or a type of environment that I'm going to want to spend my time around? And so even if you're not into hiking, listen into some of these mountain towns that I'm going to talk about, because regardless of what activities you want to do, they are going to be able to give you a good idea for, a relaxing, a down-to-earth, unwinding, vacation time. Okay, so starting out, we're going to start in New Hampshire, and New Hampshire is primarily made up of the White Mountains. Its most notable mountain is Mount Washington, which is 6,288 feet. It is the highest peak in the northeastern United States, and it's the most prominent mountain east of the Mississippi River. This is very popular in New England. Mount Washington is known for actually its insane weather changes, and I can absolutely attest to this. I've summited Washington, and it went from 90 degrees to 40 degrees to raining to sleeting. It really has some crazy weather changes, but it is absolutely worth it. I would plan to take a good chunk out of your day if you're going to do Mount Washington, and of course you're going to want to prepare for whatever weather might come towards you. But like I said, it's worth it. It's one of the best hikes I've ever done. Something unique about Mount Washington is that you can actually drive up it. If you're from New England, or you get a chance to visit, you will know that you literally cannot go 20 minutes driving without seeing a car that has that bumper sticker that says, "This car climbed Mount Washington." And yes, if you're wondering, it does get old. But, this is a really popular thing to do for tourists and for locals. There's also a train that will bring you all the way to the top. So you can drive to the top, you can take a train to the top. And something very unique is that there's a massive gift shop and a massive restaurant at the top. And so some of it is really nice. It's really nice to climb all the way to the top of a mountain and be able to sit down indoors and enjoy some wonderful food. And these attractions, seem really convenient and are fun for travelers. But as you could also imagine, a lot of local hikers are actually not happy about this, and they were increasingly angry when in 2017 it was announced that there was going to be construction for a 35-room hotel and restaurant about 600 vertical feet below the summit. And that it's going to start to go under construction. And I don't want to get into too much into this, but I think I wanted to use this opportunity to bring up this issue. And however you feel about it, if you would like to get more information, you should go to www.protectmountwashington.org. And if you're interested in signing a petition or, again, learning more about what is going on with that issue, I would suggest going to this website. I can't dwell too much on it, and we're gonna continue to move on. But besides Mount Washington, you've got just, lots of options in the White Mountains, from, treacherous, sweat-breaking hikes like, through the Franconia Notch and the Presidential Range, to hour-long, leisurely, kid-friendly, dog-friendly hikes like Mount Major or Black Cat Mountain. You really do have options here. Like I said, you have options in all of New England, and New Hampshire is a great place to do this. If you're looking for a particular town to stay in to complete some of these hikes, or like I said, just to enjoy that hiker, mountain environment, I would suggest the town of North Conway. It's very popular, and it's a town that's a great midpoint for any hike that you're going to want to do in the White Mountains. I would suggest staying here for a really great time. Also in North Conway, there are a lot of natural rivers and lakes. You can go cliff jumping and rope swinging, and there are a lot of natural springs that you can cool off in. Specifically, I would check out Diana's Bath and Echo Lake to cool off after your day of hiking. I could spend all day talking about New Hampshire. However, we are going to move on and talk about the Green Mountains, which are in Vermont. And Vermont literally means Green Mountain, I'm pretty sure. Fun fact. Again, so many of these mountains have so much to offer. I really would recommend Mount Mansfield. It's the tallest mountain in Vermont. It's a really popular tourist and local mountain, and it has some insane views. I would recommend this mountain, however, only to someone who has hiked before and is really comfortable with hiking, because it is a tall mountain and it's a bit treacherous, but again, worth it if that's what you're interested in. If you're looking to reconnect with nature and stay close to a mountain base, I would check out the very, very small town of Barnard, Vermont. Like I said, it is a tiny town. It's in the mountains. It's right on a lake. And what I like about Barnard is that there are a lot of bed and breakfasts to go to, a lot of hotels, and some small resorts available. And so to me, I would think that this would be perfect for, a couple's weekend away. If you want something relaxed, maybe a little less known, quiet, peaceful, all of the things that, you're looking to get if you're going to be vacationing in the mountains of New England, I would check out Barnard, Vermont. If you want something a little bit more well-known, maybe something a little bit more populated, some more restaurants, I would check out the mountain town that is Stowe, Vermont. I would say most people who live in Vermont or from Vermont would probably recommend that to you. Great for skiing, great for hiking, and great just to stay in general. Okay, lastly, I said we had mountains in New Hampshire and Vermont, and of course, Maine. Maine is absolutely massive, and it has so much nature to offer. Like I mentioned, I think New England is special because of how quiet and kind of removed it is, and Maine is really the peak of this. I don't think I've ever been to a place that has so much untouched land like Maine does, and just so much quiet and, no light pollution. You can go on a hike and not see anyone else, and I think that there is something to be said about that. And if you live in a place like LA or New York or, somewhere really populated, I would really consider coming to Maine to kind of relax and unwind and get away from your everyday life. And a great way to do this is to go to Acadia National Park or Baxter National Park. Acadia is on the coast of Maine, and it's just gorgeous. It's truly breathtaking. Honestly, any mountain you want to climb here is really recommended. Just do your research, look up how rigorous each mountain is, and then that goes the same for Baxter State Park. Just look up, what type of difficulty you're interested in, and there are plenty of resources online to help you sort out what type of mountain would be right for you. Mount Katahdin is a difficult but very loved hike in Maine, and a lot of my friends have done Katahdin. I unfortunately have not yet. It's on the top of my bucket list. But it is really well known, and what it's particularly well known for is its Knife's Edge Trail, which essentially, in order to get to the peak, you walk across this narrow ridge, and that is how you summit the mountain, and I think that's so epic. And if you're interested in that, like I am, definitely check out Mount Katahdin, and like I said, check out Maine in general. So again, so many places to stay in Maine. Really depends on what you're looking for here. If you want, more remote, if you want to be by the ocean, if you want to be inside the mountains, if you want to be near Portland, the city, you have lots and lots of options. And so it's very difficult for me to recommend anyone to you, but if you are looking for a mountain town, check out Bridgeton or Bethel. Both are notable options in their own way. Again, one more time, I'll just say, just do your research. So these are the states and places I would recommend if you want to relax, unplug, and get back in touch with nature. When we come back from the break, I am going to talk to you about the best cities in New England and where exactly you should go if you want that city environment.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Before the break, I talked to you about the mountain area of New England and where exactly you should go if you are looking to get your hiking in, or if you're looking to relax and unwind in a remote area of New England. We, of course, now are going to switch gears, and I'm going to talk to you about what cities and populated areas you should be traveling to when you're traveling to New England. So, I mean, of course, we really can't even start this segment without talking about Boston. And I'm going to try to hold my tongue and just give you a brief synopsis of what you could do here in Boston, because I really would like to do my own episode just on Boston. It's a massive city. It's very well known. It is a place, again, near and dear to my heart. I used to live in the city. And like I said, I would love to do a whole segment, if not a whole episode on Boston. But to make it short, I'll try to give you just, the highlights. If you are flying to New England, if you live far away, this is most likely where you'll be landing. And so my recommendation would be, obviously you could spend a week here, you could probably spend a month here, but I would at least spend a day or two in Boston, whether you're coming in or coming out. It's also right in the middle of New England. It's a really fair point from almost any other state. So Boston has, an extremely unique culture to it. It is one that is so rich with history. I don't think I've ever been to another city that has as much history as Boston does. And so if you are looking to stay in Boston, you can't even walk down the street without hearing or seeing or, witnessing a piece of history. And I would suggest first and foremost to go seek out some of that history. I'm talking thousands of different, guide companies that could lead you around. You can walk the Freedom Trail. You can go through the Boston Commons and the Garden, and kind of explore that history and all that it has to offer. Some other great things to do in Boston is, if you're really looking for a tourist experience, you can do a duck tour. If you've ever been to Boston, you know what I'm talking about. If you've never been to Boston, a duck tour are these giant buses that, of course, look like a duck. They go in the water. They also go on the street all around. They're very loud. They're very obnoxious, but they will take you all around the city. You'll have a probably super charismatic tour guide. And this is kind of, like I said, a silly touristy thing, but a really great way to get around the city. I grew up doing it as a kid. Definitely someone for all ages. Definitely kid friendly. And so I would suggest that. Otherwise, Boston is a relatively small city. It's walkable. You can get around for the most part. The subway system, it's called the T. It's also really easy to navigate. There are massive shopping places like Newbury Street. There are, more nuanced places. There's, subcultures in the suburbs that you can go to. Boston is just a place for everyone. And like I said, it's really close to a lot of other places. I grew up in a small town in New Hampshire that was only an hour away from Boston and very accessible by train. But like I said, you'll most likely be flying into Boston, stay in Boston, walk around, see all the monuments you need to see, rent a car, and then you can kind of go from there. Now, moving on to the next city that I want to talk about is in Massachusetts as well, and that's Newburyport. And I just kind of wanted to throw this out there because just in case you are coming to New England to kind of escape that city life, Newburyport is, I would call it a city. It's on the ocean. It's really small and quaint. You really are going to get that New England vibe from it. And it's full of shops and restaurants and antique hotels. And like I said, it is much more quiet. It's much more reserved, and that's called Newburyport. Moving on, I have to talk about Rhode Island, and of course, that city that I'm going to say to go to is Newport, Rhode Island. This is a very classy, posh New England city. If you're looking to, experience that vineyard vines culture, Newport is where you're going to want to go to. Again, it's also on the water. It's a great place to go to if you want to stay in a quaint little hotel, if you want to go to coffee shops and do some shopping. It being on the water gives you a lot of different opportunities for adventure and for sightseeing. And so that is something I would suggest to you if you are really looking to get that ocean New England preppy town experience. Moving on to Connecticut. So Connecticut is probably the state that I'm least familiar with in New England, despite having lived here my whole life. Connecticut is a really interesting state, and I think maybe the state that's, maybe the most different from all the others in New England. And I have to say, I asked a lot of people from Connecticut what city is best to go to, and all of them said, just go to New York City. And so I don't know if I'm going to get any shade for that, but this is not coming from me. This is coming from multiple of my friends that live in Connecticut. They all said, if you're going to go to Connecticut and you're looking for a city, you might as well go to New York City because it is so close. And so that's the advice that I'm going to give you based on my opinions of my friends. Okay, moving on to New Hampshire. New Hampshire is my home state. I love it very much. There are Concord and Manchester, which are the two biggest cities in New Hampshire. I would call them more of an industrial city. I think there's less, touristy things to do. It really is not a super friendly city. And so the city that I would recommend to you in New Hampshire is, there we go, Portsmouth. Portsmouth is right on the ocean. It's a very historic place, home to very unique culture. It really is a bridge between the New England art scene and the New England kind of preppy, ocean scene. And it has been, like I said, historical and really important to New Hampshire culture for a long time. It has amazing music, amazing musicians, amazing food, great shops, it's a very wide city, and so there's kind of this one main area that you can shop and, eat really good food, but there's also kind of outside surrounding areas. You can go to the beach in Portsmouth. You can go on a nature walk in Portsmouth. You really do have a lot of options when you go to this town, and like I said, it's just about an hour from Boston. It has a beach in it. It's, 35 minutes away from a mountain. And so if you're looking to get a full New England experience, I would suggest going to a city like Portsmouth or Newburyport, like I mentioned, in Massachusetts. One of these towns is going to be a great base for you to be able to go to other places. And so for New Hampshire, I say Portsmouth. Now, this is not a city in New Hampshire, but I think it is worth being mentioned, and that's Wolfboro, New Hampshire. And it lives on Lake Winnipesaukee, which is a really popular tourist destination to go to in New Hampshire. This, like I said, is not a city. It's much more of a town, but it is populated. It has a lot of hotels, a lot of shops, and is a great place to visit and to kind of hunker down to if you're looking to explore a lot of different New England places. And very nice perk. It is on Lake Winnipesaukee. You've got lots of activities to do there. Okay, moving on to Maine. We have Portland. Portland, Maine is the designated artsy city of New England. It really is young and hip and has a great music scene. You can go walk on the water, you can go to shops, you can go to restaurants, you can go to museums, art museums. I mean, it really has almost anything. Science museums. It's always got kind of this new, different, exhibit happening or, protest happening. It's a very modern city, and it's really liberal and hip, and if you're looking for a quirky, fun city, I would really suggest to go to Portland, Maine. Okay, last but not least, which is the city that I currently live in, and that is Burlington, Vermont. Burlington is essentially, instead of, a ski or snow town, this is a ski or snow city. It is on Lake Champlain. It's really close to a lot of mountains. It's a very young city, and it happens to be one of the best college towns in the United States. It is where Ben and Jerry's originally started. Like I said, it's right on Lake Champlain. That gives you a lot of options. It's very close to Canada. In Burlington, there is a famous Church Street. There's no cars. It's shops and restaurants and, a really big bridge of local and industrial. And in Burlington, like I said, you get that city vibe. It's very populated. You could stay at any place you wanted to. You can do that shopping. You can do museums. You can do great cuisine, but you also are sitting on Lake Champlain. You have options to go canoeing and kayaking in the river, in the lake. You can go drive 10 minutes and get to a mountain. You can go hiking. There really are so many options for you. Again, if you're looking to be in a populated place, if you're looking to be able to go to a different restaurant every single night, but you also want to be able to experience that New England culture and that New England wildlife and nature, Burlington would be the right city for you. Okay, that was a lot to deal with, but those were all of the cities that I just named for you in New England that I think are really worth going to. We are going to take a break, but when we come back, I am going to talk to you about what exactly you should be doing in New England, what activities you should be planning on, what to do, what not to do, so on and so forth. So stay tuned for after the break.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith.
An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
Okay, Okay, before the break, we talked about the major cities that you need to be going to when you are visiting New England and all that the cities have to offer. Now, I've talked to you about mountain towns, I've talked to you about cities, and you're probably wondering why you should be going to New England in the first place and what exactly there is to do when you go to visit these places. And so I've come up with a list of 10 things that I think are worth doing, are worth your time, are worth your money, all while you are in New England. And as a precursor to this, as we know, New England has 4 beautiful seasons, but because it has 4 beautiful seasons, you can't do all of these things in one trip. You should plan and target your trip to what you're interested in and what you want to do. And so if you're looking, to snow and to tube and to have a very quiet, quaint, relaxed trip, you need to be going in the winter. If you are looking to get that beach time in, if you are looking to do some hiking, if you are looking to relax and unwind and catch some rays, go in the summer. And then if you're here for that leaf peeping season, please come in the fall time. It's so worth it. I think it's worth it to come in all seasons. And I think spring also gets a pretty bad rep, but you can do most of these things in the springtime. A lot of times my favorite time to hike is actually in the spring because it is not super hot, but it is mostly warm enough to not have snow at the top of mountains. Anyway, so having said all that, please keep that in mind. Some of these things are seasonal. Most of them are seasonal, to be honest with you. And so, speaking of seasonal, we are going to start out at number 1, which is, you guessed it, it's what most people come to New England to do, and that is to go skiing. If you don't know how to ski or snowboard, I want you to know that it's totally okay. You do not have to be a seasoned veteran in order to enjoy the mountains or in order to enjoy skiing. There are plenty of opportunities for you to take lessons while you're on the mountain. In fact, so much of the culture around skiing is around doing that. If, you are here for skiing and that's something you love to do, then that's great. And that can be, your whole week and you could plan your whole trip around that. But if you are learning and you just want to experience it, you can also go to a mountain for one day. You could buy a day pass and, that could be it for you. Ski culture is a huge part in New England, and most mountains you go to do have kind of their own unique culture that goes along with it. And so something that I'll say to that is, pay attention and really think about the size of the mountain. I think that there's, a lot to be said to going to a huge, massive mountain that's super famous, and you're going to get some amazing experiences from that, especially if you know how to ski, but pay mind to and allow yourself, to go to a smaller mountain if you are less of an expert, and if you're just learning. I think that there is something to be said about going to a small mountain. And something that I think is so amazing about kind of doing this as an activity is many people are used to, in New England, many people on the weekends will go skiing. It's kind of a family thing. It's kind of a cultural thing. And most people will ski in the day and then they retire to a lodge with warm drinks and a family dinner. And like I said, this is how so many of my friends spent their weekends in New England growing up. And it just creates this kind of bubble and this culture of a warm and welcoming place. And so it is a great place to go to, and you totally can do it for a whole week long. And it's, been a blast for me to do it over the years and over vacations. Having said all of that, it feels very overwhelming for me to recommend you one ski mountain in New England. Each mountain has its own personality to it, and I think, to try to narrow it down, a lot of people in New England would recommend Vermont to you in terms of the best mountains. There's Killington, Sugarbush, and Snow Mountain. These are all very popular, really big mountains. But there's also Sugarloaf and Sunday River in Maine, and Loon and Cranmore, New Hampshire. And like I said, just remember that piece of advice I gave you, which is that if you're really into skiing and big mountains, then you should shoot your shot and go for all those big mountains. But if you are looking for a less crowded and smaller mountain, if you're a beginner, if you are just visiting for a day, check out some of these smaller mountains. Like I said, and like I will always say, just do your research. Okay. that is going to wrap up skiing for us. Moving on to number 2 is, of course, you have to go to a sports game. I'm telling you, you will not regret it. I think that New England is infamous for its insane sports fans and just an insane culture around sports in general. Growing up in New England, there really is no option for you to not be a sports fan. It is everywhere. Living in Boston, the year that the Patriots won was an insane experience. I, definitely enjoy sports, and like I said, it's part of New England culture, and so, on the weekends, on Sundays, it's something that a lot of people do. I enjoy watching sports. I enjoy going to sports games. I am by no way a sports fanatic, but it's almost impossible to kind of escape that excitement that just when a whole area of a country gets excited about one thing, it's really contagious and just an awesome thing to be a part of. And so my number 2 activity that I think that you should do is go to a sports game. And like I said, the environment around this is really important. My favorite environment to be in if I'm going to go watch a sports game is, I think, going to see a Red Sox game in Boston. Fenway is a great part of Boston, and I just think it's a great way to experience a baseball game. The tickets can range in prices. You can get them cheap. Also, you didn't hear this from me, but scalping tickets on the streets in Fenway can totally be a part of the experience. It's kind of a blast, and I swear it's something that a lot of people actually do tend to do. And what's really great is that all around Fenway are a lot of sports bars, and so if you are into going out and partying, there's an insane environment. Whether the Red Sox win or lose, you will be at some sort of party, especially if you're in the Fenway area. And like I said, being in the actual Fenway Park, being able to sit down and watch the game, you're surrounded by sports fans. It's a blast. Don't wear a Yankees uniform. Other than that, I think it will be fine. Okay. Moving on to the number 3 activity that I think that you should do while you're in New England. If you are from a part of the country that is warm, this is something I would just suggest to do in the summer, but this is something that I do year-round. This is something that I love to do. It's part of who I am, and that is go to the ocean. This, like I said, it seems like it would obviously be a summertime activity. I like to do it in the winter just because it brings me peace, but I really would be robbing you of an experience if I told you, to do anything else in New England, other than this especially. It's hands down my favorite part of New England. It's, like I said, just probably my favorite thing to do in New England. You have so many options for states. I mean, literally every single state other than Vermont does have a coastline. This is where you're going to enjoy the best foods. You're going to watch some gorgeous sunsets. You are going to be able to stay in the most extravagant, excellent places, and so on. If I had to recommend one place to go to on the beach, although, like I said, there's literally, every state has coastline on it and brings something different, I would definitely say that you should spend some time in Cape Cod, especially if you're looking for an ocean experience. Cape Cod probably deserves its own episode, and who knows, maybe if you're interested in it more, it'll get its own episode, but I just really wanted to take some extra time to talk about it. You will absolutely find enough to do in Cape Cod if you would like to just travel here. It has plenty of options for adults, for children, for young travelers. You can do it on a budget. You can do it if you have a lot of money. It is an essential New England landmark and home to, the point of this mini segment, the best beaches. It just, in my eyes, has that essential beach town feel. There is shopping, there is sightseeing, there are obviously beaches, there's boat rides, you can rent a bike, you can eat great food, and of course, it's got a port, which is going to lead us right into the next activity that I think that you need to do in New England, which is go to the islands. If you are unfamiliar with New England, you were probably asking me, what are you talking about? There's islands in New England, one of the coldest parts of America. Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket are 2 islands off of the coast of Massachusetts. They are just absolutely gorgeous. And as a precursor, I just wanted to say, actually pretty much every single thing that I have said and mentioned and recommended to you on this episode can be done on a tight budget. In fact, I think New England is a great place to go if you are trying to do a trip on a budget. However, having said all of that, these two places, Martha's Vineyard and Nantucket, are just options that you really need to be able to spend some money on. And they really can't be done too much on a budget. Maybe I'll try sometime and get back to you, but just the nature of the people that they attract and the nature of the activities that are done there, they really are more high-end places. You might have even heard of these islands because they're vacation homes to some of the most famous people in the world, like the Kardashians, Amy Poehler, Joe Biden, Ben Stiller, James Franco, Drew Barrymore. So many celebrities end up vacationing here because it is so gorgeous. And some of the things you can do, basically, there's a port in Cape Cod, like I mentioned. You take a ferry over, and when you take that ferry over, it really is like traveling into another world. You know, you walk up and there's cobblestones everywhere. It is unbelievably preppy. I don't know, if you're into the whole Vineyard Vines, Lily Pulitzer thing, you're gonna go to the right place, but you definitely don't have to be into those things to visit. I'm definitely not. Anyway, it's preppy, there's beaches, there's breweries, it's just classic essential New England. You are gonna have such a blast here. You have options to stay overnight if you want to, but you can absolutely do this in one day. You know, the ferry is kind of half the fun itself. I was able to go here a little bit as a child, and I just remember being a kid going over in that ferry was such a blast. And so this is both for Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard. They're really similar. You're gonna get a really similar experience by going to each of them. There's not much difference between the two, in my opinion. But like I said, it is so, so fun, and you'll be so happy when you did it. This is definitely a summer experience to have. It is a completely different place in the winter. It's absolutely dead. But definitely go to Martha's Vineyard or Nantucket in the summertime. So, we're gonna do number 5, and then we're gonna take a quick break before we get to 6 through 10. But kind of switching gears from that very luxurious Nantucket and Martha's Vineyard excursion that you can do, I'm going to say that something that you should do while you're in New England, and this might sound really lame, but just bear with me, you should go on an animal watch while you're here. Like I said, I know what you're thinking, that that's really lame, or it's only for, old people, or it wouldn't be interesting, but I think that you have to experience it once in your life. Like I said, it's just, New England is so important to me because of how, rural it is and how untouched it really feels. And there is so much wildlife to be seen here. It's really insane. Just as, for a few examples, you can take a boat right out of Boston and go on a whale tour. You could also do this in New Hampshire. I'm sure you can do this in a lot of other ocean places, but we have these beautiful whales, and, going on a tour is it's a great activity to do in general if you're looking to fill up your time. Being out on the water is amazing. And then obviously, seeing a whale is just an insane experience and something that is uniquely apart. Not just uniquely, whales are around the world, but, getting an experience like that is kind of a unique New England experience. And so I would suggest going on a whale tour. And another thing that you can do, and this is will be found in Maine, Vermont, and New Hampshire, is you can go out on moose tours. And it has been a lot of my friends' goals for a long time to go see a moose in the wild. Like I said, you can see moose a lot of times if you go skiing, but other than that, they are, these really quiet, rare sightings to see, and going out on a moose tour is just a blast. You're gonna get that taste of nature, and maybe if you're not, as keen on, taking a map and going hiking by yourself, then this is something that you would maybe want to do, but it is so interesting. And just, like I said, to speak to the wildlife, you can see bears, moose, whales, why wouldn't you go out and see something beautiful like that, and kind of take this opportunity of a quiet area of the country to do that. So, Like I said, we're going to take a break now. When we come back, I'm going to have number 6 through 10 for you to talk about and to what you should be doing when you're in New England. So stay tuned.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
From our break, I want to move right on to our numbers 6 through 10 for what activities you can be doing in New England. Number 6 is going to sound pretty simple, but I think it is something that New England has a lot of, and that is exploring history. I mean, New England is just full of history. It is, from start to finish, just from Vermont to New Hampshire to Maine to Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut. I mean, everywhere just has so much history in it, and I think it's really fascinating and interesting and a great thing if you have kids. It's a great thing to take your kids to go do. It's a great thing to do if you are alone and just looking to gain more information. And there are guided tours in a lot of different places, but obviously I mentioned it before. I think that, Boston is a really, really great place to go and get that history piece. Like I said, if you want to take your kids and do something educational, if you are just looking for a more enriching experience, head to Boston. You're going to get a lot of history. Newport has a lot of history. Portsmouth has a lot of history. Vermont has a lot of history. I mean, there are a lot of places that kind of are just rich with really unique stories and stories that you might not even think about until you go there and experience it. So definitely listen into some great pieces of history when you're in New England. Moving on to number 7 is going to be explore the foods. This is a piece of advice I think I would give in any new place that you're going to. It seems simple. I mean, one of the best parts of culture and one of the best parts of visiting a new place is being able to experience and get to understand different foods in different places, and New England is not exempt from this. I mean, New Englanders kind of have this obsession with some of their food, specifically maple syrup. You have to buy maple syrup while you are in New England. You have to try it. It's gonna blow all of your artificial maple syrup out the window. There are, different workshops that you can go to. You can see how maple syrup is made. Obviously the seafood is huge in New England. You've got to get lobster. You've got to get crab rolls. You've got to get, all of those different parts of, New England and seafood. And there's a lot of different things to explore while you're here. And if, cuisine is something that you're fascinated in, seek out those opportunities, to take a cooking class, get to know how maple syrup is made. Go to any port town, you're going to be able to find fresh fish food. Go home and cook food if that's what you want to do, but kind of go out and try to seek some different foods that you are maybe not used to or that are not fresh in the area of the country or the world that you are from. Number 8 ties into number 7 in terms of what you should be doing as an activity, and that is brewery tours. If you are over the age of 21, you must go on a brewery tour. There are over 500 breweries in New England, and that is literally from, Vermont to Rhode Island to Connecticut. I mean, there's every single place in New England is full of breweries, and it's a really interesting option to do if you are really into beer, if you are just over the age of 21, I think this is something that you should totally do. They are going to show you how to make beer. You can help them make it. You can also get a literal taste for all the different kinds of beers while you do it. New England is really famous to a lot of different, very notable beer companies. I would suggest, if you are going to do a beer tour, to get one that will either pick you up at your hotel or pick you up at the place you're staying at. A lot of different companies will pick you up, they'll pick different groups up, and then they will go brewery to brewery to brewery, different places. Again, you're going to get an education, you're going to get to try all of these different beers, and then they drop you off after, so you don't have to worry about drinking and driving. You're going to be able to stay safe, you can enjoy yourself, and, you might even learn a little bit of history from beer. New England and beer have a very, very long history that is tied together. In fact, there's a book written on it. It's called Crafty Bastards, and it's a book by Lauren Clark. It discusses the history of beer in New England. If you want a quick overview, I am not an expert by any means, but basically there's this famous story that the Pilgrims never intended to land in Plymouth Harbor. Their real intention was to go further south to the Hudson River, but they were running low on beer, and so that is ultimately why they decided to stay at Plymouth Harbor, and here we are today. You will learn in a much better capacity and in a much more interesting way if you go do one of these beer tours. That is enough about beer. Moving on to number 9, I'm going to say, and this might seem for only the adventurous people listening, but this really can be for anyone. I've seen 7-year-olds do it. I've seen 10-year-olds do it. And that is to go whitewater rafting. Whitewater rafting is a really popular adventure activity to do in New England. I think some of the most notable places to do it are Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, and Vermont. New Hampshire, Maine, Vermont, those are maybe the states that you would think would be most popular, and they certainly are, but I actually know a lot of places in Massachusetts that are not too far from Boston, and so let's say you want to stay in Boston for the week, but like I said, you want to get that glimpse of that New England nature. I would suggest trying to set up an opportunity to go whitewater rafting. This is mainly a summer activity, but it really can move over to the spring and to the fall. This is just an insane experience. If you are unfamiliar with whitewater rafting, essentially what it is yourself along with maybe 5 to 12 other people get in this big plastic blow-up boat. You have your own paddle and a guide, and you get sent down rapids, and there are different levels of rapids, and it is scary and thrilling and exciting and a great workout. And so if you are looking to, kind of up your adrenaline levels, I would definitely suggest going whitewater rafting. Okay, we have come a long way in this list of things to do in New England, and so I'm going to leave you with this one. This encapsulates pretty much everything I've been saying this whole episode, and that is just the simple, get outside. If you're not going to do anything else, you don't need a tour, you don't need a map, although you might need a map. I need a map. Get a camera, get a sketch pad, get a recording device if you're like me. Just go be in nature, and that really is the best part of being in New England. You've got mountains, you've got oceans, you've got lakes, you've got rivers, streams, you've got, a valley, reserve, go stargazing. We've got almost no light pollution here, and, especially if you go up in places like Maine, go seek out those opportunities that are free and easy to you and, don't require a lot of energy. If you just spend your time outside, you will have spent your time in New England the right way, and you're going to get the most out of it by doing that. And with that, we're going to take a break. We're going to end the show shortly, but I am going to tell you one final story before we end it, and that is going to be right after the break.
The GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Break with just a little bit of time to spare, and in this time I just don't think I could possibly talk about anything else in reference to New England, and especially in reference to the stories that I usually tell at the end of the podcast. And what I absolutely have to talk about today is the Salem witch trials, and all of this occurred in Salem, Massachusetts. It is a great town to visit if you are interested in this piece of history, or if you're interested in witches in general. Absolutely visit this town. Obviously, especially on Halloween. It is a super famous place to visit during Halloween. It's honestly just a unique experience in itself, and I would absolutely recommend it. But for the last few minutes, I am going to talk about the Salem witch trials. The Salem witch trials were essentially a set of hearings and prosecutions for people who were accused of witchcraft back in Massachusetts. And this was in 1692 and ran until 1693. And as we know, assuming and accusing people of being witches was something that was really popular during this time, but it was kind of like a fad, like almost a craze. And in this time where the Salem witch trials occurred, 30 people were found guilty and 19 people were executed, which obviously almost all of them are women, because I won't get too much into it, but of course women have to be, witches if they're powerful in any, means. But this was in 1692, so moving on. These arrests happened, like I said, in the town of Salem, and like I said, if you want to know more about this, go to Salem. It's super interesting. But a jury was essentially brought up, and for a whole year they accused and either found guilty or not guilty a bunch of people of witchcraft, which seems absolutely ridiculous now to me, but it's completely fascinating. There is a lot of story and myth around this. It's kind of a spooky town. If you're into ghost stories or anything supernatural, I really suggest head to this town to check out more about the Salem witch trials, what they were about, why the heck people were accusing anyone of being witches back in 1692, and, maybe you'll uncover more than you wanted to know. Maybe you'll uncover exactly what you want to know. Point being, you've got to check out this spooky town, and I couldn't talk about New England without talking about this. That is going to do it for a show today. As always, please remember to write us a nice review if you can. If you can like this podcast, if you can subscribe to it, if you can share it with your friends, all of that helps us very much. Please don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Facebook and like us. Please DM me if you're interested. Tweet at me. I would love to respond to anyone. And that is going to do it for our show. My name is Emily. Once again, thank you very much and have a good rest of your night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.